Okay, so before I start, do you have any question regarding anything that we have covered so far as part of this training? Can be anything. Okay, and yeah, tomorrow you will be having a quiz on JavaScript, which I will be posting just after the class today. And then, of course, the due or the deadline would be 6:30, meaning 24 hours from now. And also, we will start backend tomorrow. At least I'm confirmed for the Java. I'm still not sure about .NET, but we will manage something. So yep, yesterday we started talking about jQuery. So we said, okay, it's very helpful DOM manipulation libraries for JavaScript, which will simplify or JavaScript code for you, or it will do most of the work regarding or related to cross-browser compatibility for you. So you don't have to worry about all the things. And we talked about, okay, what are the features? Then we started talking about how to install jQuery. So of course you have two options, not install actually, how to use jQuery or include jQuery library file into your web page or web app. You can either download it and just provide as part of your assets, or you can also use the content delivery network. And of course there are benefits for content delivery network, and of course for your project you should be using content delivery network only. Then we talked about syntax. Of course there are only three parts of the syntax: the jQuery keyword, which can be dollar as well, selector, we covered all of the selectors yesterday, or I should say most important selectors yesterday. There is a list of all the selectors available on the jQuery.com or api.jQuery.com website. And the last part which we will be covering today is the action, or what type of actions are available. So of course we talked about how to avoid namespace conflict, just use hyphy. Then about two different events that JavaScript has, like onLoad and onDOM content loaded event. So most of the times you want to execute your script as soon as your DOM is ready. So, and since DOM content loaded event is not universal, meaning for the browsers less than IE9, meaning IE8 and 7 and 6 and so on, they have something called ready state change. So just to avoid this issue again, just use a function on jQuery which is ready, and it will internally handle whether the DOM content event DOM content loaded event to fire or ready state change event to fire, depending on what browser you are using. So the easiest one is of course the document.ready, or even if you don't want to write this much stuff, there is a short form for that one as well. So that's your how to init or initialize your jQuery execution. So it's here ready. Then of course if you want to access the DOM element or the native DOM element from your jQuery object, well, you can just use the database indexing and then get whatever element that you are referring to or want. And then the reverse is also same. If you have DOM element and you want to convert that into jQuery object, just wrap it around $, and that should be enough. Again, how to figure out whether your selector has returned something from the DOM, just check the length property on the jQuery object, and it will determine whether that element with this selector is available in the DOM or not. What else? Then we started talking about selectors. So we went through the basic selectors. We covered a few of the very basic, including the universal class, element ID, and of course we saw the combination or how to get combined result from multiple selectors. So just use comma. Then some attribute selectors, depending whether you are talking about only the attributes, or if you are even comparing certain value for the attribute, or not equals to, or contains this string into the attribute value, or even intersection of the selections or selectors. That can also be done if you don't put anything in between. So no space, no comma, then it becomes intersection of those selections. Then hierarchical, where you have options of either put a strict parent-child relationship, or you can also have ancestor-descendant relationship, as depending whether you are using the sign or using some space. If you are using plus, then of course you are trying to ask, give me all the next elements which are, or where prev element are preceding the next element. So of course this is the way you can get all the p dot outer elements here. Then of course for the child selector as well that we have here, so you can access the first child of its parent, last child of its parent of any nth child of its parent, and just like we had in CSS, you can use this to specific strings which are even and odd, or you can pass any number here, or even an arithmetic progression would work. And then of course there are some selectors for the form as well, including, or form meaning all the inputs and selects. So you can check, or you can get all the checked inputs or selected inputs. You can get all the disabled or the enabled inputs, or of course even via the type as well. So any type of the input that you want, you can get that, and you can change as per your requirement the action. Then of course there are a few for the content as well. So there is one called has, and then you can pass any other selector inside the has, and it will find out all the div elements in this case which are having a p element with a class inner. Then the contents as well, which takes care about the text. If you pass any text, it will find out all the divs in this case which are having the text awesome. Then empty as well, you can pretty much find out the empty element which are not having any children or any text as well. Then the parent as well, which are of course parent, so at least they should be having some element or text. Now of course if you just want to select first from the selected or matched elements, then of course you can just use first or last or even or odd, all works. And then of course if you want to pass not selectors, then of course it can be done. So here you are asking, give me all the inputs which are not checked. So you can do all this, and then of course the last one is the hidden, if you want to access or select the element which is hidden, and this is determined by jQuery depending on whether display was set to none in CSS or width or height was set to 0. So here we stopped yesterday, and today we'll try to cover as much as we can. And starting today we are discussing about actions, which is last part of your jQuery. Of course this is much in detail than selectors, but still we will cover most of the things today. So let's start with the CSS, or the basic actions or methods or functions on jQuery which can handle or which can change the styling, meaning some CSS functions. So of course you see there are lots of CSS functions available here. I will cover a few of them. The rest of them are pretty easy. You can go there on the website and then just look in the description and go click on that one. You will get the proper examples as well. So starting with the first one. The first one is what? Add class or remove class. So now if you want to add a particular CSS class onto a set of elements, or remove particular class from set of elements, you can just use add or remove. So now in this case you are adding one class on this, all the divs present in the DOM, or in this case you are adding multiple classes, so you can add space separated thing onto the div, and then in this case of course you will be adding multiple classes. And now if you want to remove some class, just use remove class, pass the name of the class, and that class will be removed if available on that div element. So let's see the example. So I have all this. Let's just go, and since we are dealing with the class, we need to have class here to edit dynamically using JavaScript. So what we'll do, we create some, let's say, rate class, and then say color equals to rate. Now we go back to our JavaScript and say, or in the jQuery file, and then say, okay, select all span element and then add class rate onto that, on all of the span elements. That's what we are saying. So probably we have more than one span. So of course we had, I think, 1, 2, and I think few more should be there, 3. So we have 3 at least. Let's try. And what we are doing, we are saying, okay, add class rate onto that one, and since rate is a class in our CSS, that can be applied, so it will just change the color. So yep, it's a, and you can see that it has changed the color for those guys. And this is add class. If you want to apply multiple, so let's say blue background, something like this. Of course you can have background, that one as well. So pick just this one, go back to a jQuery, put a high space, and then just put another class. So now it has applied both the classes. So yep, that can be done. Then what is the remove class? Of course, as the name suggests, if anytime you want to remove some class, you can just pass the name of the class to the remove class function and it will be changed. Now the next one is the toggle class. So you have add class and remove class. What if you want to toggle a class, meaning if it is there, then remove it. If it is not there in this element, just add it. So that's the meaning of the toggle class. So for example, let's have this like this, right? And then we want to toggle it. The meaning of toggle is, of course, if it is there already, it will remove it. If it is not there, then just add it. So just to mimic that, what I will be doing, I will be calling set interval, so that we figure out okay how it is working. And then let's say after every 2 seconds, I'm gonna toggle the class. And instead of add class, let's call toggle class, and let's make it 1 second. So after a second, it will be added, it will be removed, it will be added and removed. So it's kind of a blinking effect right now. So that's how you can use toggle class. If you don't know whether the class is already there, or if you want to have this alternate behavior, just use toggle class. Easier. Then if you want to check whether somebody has the class or not, or want to return true or false, then of course you can use has class. And as the name suggests, it will return true or false depending whether this class is available on this first element or not. So for example, I think we should be having some class here. Yeah. Do we have anything? Just give some ID to it. And let's select and see if the div with the ID my div has class Hina, and then just log it. So yep, it says true because the class is there. If you put something else, okay, it's not that. One more, and then yep, it is false because this class is not available there. One question, is it a good practice to have multiple classes on single HTML element? Yes, sir. Is this toggle class used for blinking? Nope. It's just the effect that accidentally I created, because even I didn't use for blinking. I mean, who uses blink, or who have the blinking thing? Yeah. So, yep, there is one raised hand from someone. Chintan, go ahead.
So like, in what scenario you will need multiple classes on a single element, and like how can you use it? So like you can have all CSS in one class, right?
Well, of course you can have, but let's say you are using, you have large application, right? Okay. So for example here, in navigation, so you want to extend, or you want to use the feature of both of the classes, or both of these classes. So we have navbar and we have navbar fixed top. So of course here is navbar, so that properties will also be applied, and the other one which is giving you another behavior for fixing or position fix here in this case. So you can have that feature as well if you apply both of the classes together on this panel. Or if for example here there are what, 1 and 2 classes. So here also you are asking to have Plunker editor layout class, which is this, and also have properties from UI layout container, which should be nowhere. Okay, so probably it's just a selector. So of course you can always use multiple classes and nobody has restriction, or it is not the best practice. No, it is not the worst practice. I mean, it's perfectly fine if you use multiple classes on a single element.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So we have has class to check whether the class is present on that particular element or not. Then of course the basic ones, the CSS. So of course these classes are just for using or adding or removing or toggling class. So meaning you have to have those classes in your CSS file. What if you just want to add some CSS feature on the fly, not worrying about the class actually? So in this case, what you can do is you can use CSS or CSS function. That, if you remember, we were always using CSS in all the selector examples that we did yesterday. So this is the CSS, and again, if you just pass the property, then of course it will kind of return, or it will just behave like a getter, meaning it will return the color value. If you pass property and the value, then it will set color to the blue in this case. Or if you have multiple properties and values to set on this particular element, then you can pass the object itself, the JavaScript object with property value, and of course so on. So this also can be done. If so, it can access. So there are three different behaviors of this function. You can get the value if you don't pass. If you just pass the property, you can set the property and the value if you pass two parameters, or if you pass one object like this, then of course you can set multiple properties in one call to CSS. And again, we have been doing this for long, so let's just do this again. For example, I want to multiple. For example, all the colors for P elements has to be red for some reason. What else? And it's a JavaScript object, remember. And then what do you want? The background color to be blue. What else? I think enough. And spelling problem, background. So yeah, you can edit, and remember that where will this be applied? So this will all be applied in the style attribute. If you go there, because you didn't use any CSS class, right? So there was no other reason, no other way to apply these classes or these properties, the CSS properties, other than just using the style attribute. So that's how jQuery did it for you, right? Because you didn't create any class. So of course jQuery won't go to a CSS file and edit CSS file to add this class. It will just apply using style attribute. And of course, since you are applying on the style attribute, they will have the highest priority. So that's your CSS. And again, as I said, I mean, there are lots of other functions in jQuery which will behave something like this. They will be able to return you the value if you don't provide any value. They will be behaving like a setter, and then of course you can set an object as well. There are a few functions behaving this way. We will see all of them. And then of course there are two other functions like height and width on any element. So for example, you can get height and width in unitless pixel value. So of course it will not return you the unit, and it will just return you one integer. For example, if you say window.height, well, let's just execute here only. So I'm gonna execute for this particular page, and I say window.height. So of course it is 374. Now if you remember, there was one other thing, window.inner, which is native to JavaScript. If you do that, then of course it's the inner height that this height will be returning in from jQuery. What about if you need outer height? Then of course you have to do the normal JavaScript way using this function. So of course this height will always return you the inner height, excluding the toolbars and everything. So you can have the window height in this case. For example, let's try the window height of this guy. So I have to change the frame. I went back to the Plunker frame, which is your application here, and then I'm running the same code again. So if you see, 257 is the height, which is from here to here. What about document height? So document height is 388. So what is the difference between window height and document height? Most of the times they look similar. Well, the case is window height will be just from here to here. It doesn't, or it will not involve scroll. This is scroll bar. But document height will involve the scroll bar as well. So document height is this complete height from here to the entire document, and that's why it's more than your window, because there is a scroll bar. So that's why 388 versus 257. What else? And of course you can also get height of any other object as well. So you can just pass something like this and then say height or width. If you don't pass any argument inside, then they will be returning you the width and height in pixel, and of course it will be a number here, so no unit, but you have to understand that this is pixel. Then if you want to set something, well, if you are setting some pixel value without any unit, you can set just like a number, or if you want to set a percentage or EM or REM value, then you have to use string, and then that height will be set, something like this. Of course you cannot set the height of window by yourself. Let's say I want to set it to 400. Can you do that? Nope, doesn't matter. For the document, can you do that? Let's make it 900. Doesn't matter, because the heights of these are determined by what content they have as far as document is concerned, plus window height is of course controlled by the user or the browser itself, so you cannot change it. What else? Then of course there are two important things like offset and position. So when you use offset on a particular element, you will get an object with these two things, top and left coordinates, and in that case your offset will be relative to the document. If you use position, in that case it will return you the same type of object, top and left coordinates, but at that time it will be relative to its parent. So these are two different things. We will try one by one or the other. So let's try to get offset and everything for this ID myp. So this is your myp, and then let's get what is offset. Also log it so that we can have multiple things, and then have position as well. So you see the difference. In case of offset, you get 210, which is the distance from here to the top of the browser. In the position you get 194. The reason is the position is relative to the parent. Sorry. So in that case the parent is, I think, the div which is outside, which is starting somewhere from here. So that's why you have some lesser top value, because position is relative to the parent while offset is relative to the browser's window. So that's why browser offset will always be more than your position call here. So that's how you can get the current location of the stack, for example here. So this corner is at 210 pixel from the top and 8 pixel from the left. If you are talking about relative to its parent, then it's 194 pixel from its parent, which is somewhere here, and 8 pixel from this way. If you want to see where is the parent, then of course who is the parent of this guy? Here. And then you see there is already some margin on top of that, then that's why it has some 90, how much, 16 pixel difference. So that's your offset and position. What else? So we have covered most of the CSS or styling related jQuery functions. So of course you can add classes if you already have in your CSS or any external CSS file. You can toggle it, you can remove it, you can check whether someone has class or not, or if you don't want to have classes but still you want to change the styling, you can use CSS, and then of course in this case all the CSS properties will be applied on the style attribute on the particular DOM elements. Now we talked about height and width of a particular element. Of course you can have it, or you can also get the position or coordinates of top and left, depending whether you are using offset or position. If you use offset, then of course it will be relative to the document or the window. If you use position, then of course it will be relative to the parent. Okay, so that's what about the styling. Let's go on for DOM manipulation, which is very important, because you want to add some elements, you want to create of course some element, you want to delete some elements, you want to add some attributes, everything is here. So the first one is of course the HTML string. Now if you want to create element on the fly, so you have two options: either give the tag like this, where you are saying, okay, create a p tag. And then if you want, for example, if you have some complex HTML string like this, then also you can put that string inside the jQuery, and then of course it will be able to create, or it will create this entire element in one go. So both are different approaches here and here. The only problem with this is, I mean, jQuery has to parse everything, and then if you want to, let's say there are multiple objects in between, then you want to put some element, some events or some specific things on those elements which are inside the p element, let's say, then of course you have to go back and find out those elements from here. So I always go with this approach where I build this entire HTML DOM tree using, or by creating and updating single element at a time. Now the difference between this and a proper selector would be, so what is the difference between this and your p selector, let's say? So this is what you are saying, okay, give me all the p elements from this DOM, right? This is your selection. But as soon as you put this braces or angled braces, you are asking jQuery to create a new p element tag. Of course, as of now, you haven't added this p tag to anywhere. It's just in the memory, just like it's document.createElement. But here you just pass your angled brackets, and then of course it will create in the memory for you. Now you have to know how to add it to the DOM, otherwise there is no use of that element, right, in the memory. So there are lots of functions to add it to the DOM. So you can use append, which is kind of append child of your JavaScript native API, but there is one more which is called prepend, and in that case, in case of append you use, it will be added to the last of here. If you use prepend, this guy will be added to the first, as the first element of this div. So for example, in our case, let's create one li element on the fly. Let's call it, and one li element. So we have this right now, right? If you want to add it to this existing UL, what we can do is select the UL and then let's say append and pass that li element. So of course it's empty right now, so you will just see one dot, that's it, no content. We don't know how to put content as of now. So this is appending, meaning adding as a last child, you can see here. If you want to prepend, of course you can do that, and in that case it will be added as the first child. So that's append and prepend. What about adding after or before? That means you are talking about sibling case in this case. So after and before of course will work with the sibling, while append and prepend will work with the parent and the child. Okay, that behavior. So for example, here there is no meaning of putting li just on the level of ul, because if you use after here, it will be added as a sibling to this ul. You really want as a child of that ul, right? So that's why we were using append or prepend. Now, but still you want to use, or you want to just see how your after and before would work. So what you can do, you can select any li and then say after and before this new li. So we can say something like, okay, we already know all other selectors, right? So let's say I select the third one first of all, and then I add the new li element after the third one. So that's how you can see it here. So what you did here, you selected one li element using your already known selectors, and then you use li. So that's why, as I said, after and before works on the siblings. So that's why you have to select a certain sibling, and then only you can put some element. Or if you can use before, then of course it will be added before third element, because that's what you asked. So it's added before third element now. So that's of course append and prepend for parent and child, after and before for siblings. Then of course the most useful one is the HTML. Now the difference between this HTML and the one that I have given here it will create the element as well as its content inside. So that's your HTML string that you pass to your jQuery. Now in this case you are calling a method HTML. So what would happen, this is your parent, and whatever you type here, whatever HTML string or even text that you provide here, it will be placed as a child of this div. So that's a setter kind of thing. If you want to get all the content as a string, then of course just pass nothing, and then it will return the HTML content of this div. So let's figure out this thing as well. Let's see. Let me just console out, and let's say I want to get the content of, there is something called inner, I think. So right now, of course, you are having the selector, so that's why you are having this entire jQuery object. As soon as you put HTML function here, you will get the textual representation of the content of your inner div, I think, which is this. So whatever you have inside, which are two P elements, you got it here as text. So that's your HTML. And if you pass anything, for example, I want to create one more, I will just pass one more string here, and then you will see it will be added, or the previous content will be replaced with whatever you have now, because you are asking here to replace whatever it had before with what you are passing here. So that is what happened, because if you remember the para with my para, and then there were two inner paras, right? As soon as you use HTML here and pass some string or HTML string, that was replaced with this HTML, which is another P tag with some text, which is here, and span as well in between. So yeah, you can still have the DOM tree inside here, HTML. So yep, append, prepend, after, before, HTML. So far we know how to create elements on the fly. What about adding some attributes? Or before that, let's talk about how about emptying something. So we have this UL element, let's say, and we want to empty it or remove everything, or just remove everything from it. There, what you can do now is just call empty on that particular selection. So for example, I want to empty out entire UL. Okay, so that happened. There is nothing now. It's empty out. And if you see the structure in the DOM, it is removed from the DOM as well, or all the children have been removed from the DOM as well for UL. So you are telling or asking, empty out these UL elements. Of course, UL will still be there, but no child, with no child. So that's your empty. So again, you are trying to manipulate the DOM by adding new elements, by appending or prepending, after, before at certain place. You can also access the HTML, or of course add or you replace new HTML. You can also empty out some item. So that's easy. Now let's talk about this important thing, the iter or remove iter, or whatever you call it, attribute and remove attribute. So of course, as the name suggests, this attribute is used to get the value of the attribute or set the value of the attribute. So that's what you are doing using this one. So if you just pass the name of the attribute, it will return you the value of the attribute name here. If you pass actually both name and in the value, in this case, for example, it will set name attribute to the my div value. So it can be performing, it can have this too as well. And again, as we have seen with the CSS, it can also accept a JavaScript object with all the attribute and values. So for example, here it's an image tag, then you are setting the src, the title, the alt, all together in one JavaScript object and pass it to your attr function. So of course that can be done. And then of course, if you want to remove an attribute anytime, you can just pass its name, and then that attribute will be removed. Okay. Any doubt until here? Let's try with this one. So let's say I have this my p, just add few attributes. So let's say I am gonna add the name to some p or something, I don't know. So now this my p, if you look into the DOM, it will have the attribute some p, or the name attribute, and then of course the value is some p. You can have this one. Okay. Now let's say you have one input here. Of type checkbox. Let's have its ID as well. C box or something like that. You have this checkbox, and of course you can put some label as well. So something like this. So now you have it, you click this, so it is set and remove and like this, right? Let's see what is happening in the DOM for when you click this. So this is your attribute, this is your input type checkbox. If you click it, nothing happens, right? It's still the same. So where is, or how to get the current selection state for this checkbox? So it's not doing anything in the DOM as of now. Okay. What if I want to set the checkbox to default in a checked position or checked state default? In that case, what you can do is you can just say checked in this, and then it will be automatically checked on the startup. If you remove it, then of course it will not be checked by default. So you can handle this by handing out this attribute. Now let's see here. So this checked is okay on, or it is available on the attribute as an attribute on this input. So of course you understand it is checked. If you remove it, well, it is still there. So there must be something else to get the current value of this selection here, right? You can't just depend on the attribute, because that attribute is just there if you put it as default. If you don't do that, then of course it won't be there. But still, if you want to check it, it will be checked, but you will not be depending on the attribute only to get the current value in the JavaScript. So how to get that value? Well, for that you have prop, which is a property, get a property and remove the property. I'll forget about remove property. You will never use this mostly. But yeah, what or how to get the checked status of that particular checkbox in this case, or particular DOM element, or if you want to set it from JavaScript. So let's say forget about this checkbox from here right now. So it is default unchecked, right? If you want to check it using JavaScript, what you can do is just use prop and then say checked true, like this. Checked has to be string. And now you can check it using JavaScript as well, or if you want to just delay it to see the effect, just use the timeout here. After let's say 2 seconds, this is gonna check itself. So you have nothing, 1, 2, and it is checked properly. So of course you have to depend on prop function to figure out whether this is checked or not, or also to set its value to true. If it's already checked like this, and you want to remove the check after 2 seconds, then just pass false like this. So starting, you have checked somewhere that you want to uncheck it, just send it false value, something like this. So it is already checked here, and after 2 seconds it will be checked to false. Now don't use remove prop on all of these properties like checked, disabled, value, selected. Anytime if you want to get some property from, especially from these checkboxes or the radio boxes, you just use prop and pass on that property like checked, disabled, value, and selected depending on the state. If you don't pass any value, then of course it will be used as a getter. If you pass any value as well, then it will be used as a setter. Now when to use the remove, or what if we remove use remove property on this checked, selected, disabled, all these native properties on the DOM element. But in that case, if you remove a native property, you will never get it back because you are playing with the DOM element here. So just keep in mind that whenever you should never be using remove property on the native properties or native elements property. And where are these properties? So you can just, for example, try to log here this guy. Where is dollar here? So you see actually where is this current state is being saved. So it is saved in this DOM element. So if you scroll down, there is something called checked here. Right now it is false, and that's why it is false here. It has nothing to do with the attribute now. It is just with these properties, and you can see these are properties on this object, so you have to use prop function here. Checked, or even something like disabled, draggable, or enable. Well, there is nothing called enable, I think. Then multiple. All these true false values, they will all be handled via prop function. Read only, required, all this. Translate. I don't know. Few more. Few are which are specific to WebKit or the Chrome. So yep. Anytime you want to handle these Boolean properties on the checkboxes, on the radio boxes, just use prop. And again, keep in mind that never use remove prop on this native properties. If you remove, you will never get it back for the duration of that application. Now, then when to use remove prop? Well, if you are adding your own property, which can be anything, in that case you are fine if you remove that property. So it will remove that property. So this is the meaning of prop, which is used to handle, or used to handle to get this current state of your input or the DOM element or some property, or even set it to true or false depending on that. Okay, any doubt here regarding when to use prop? So if you go there on this DOM manipulation page and to prop here, they will tell you for all this status, like the checked. There was a list, probably they removed. Anyway, so for your checked, disabled, value, selected, required, draggable, all these things, all these DOM properties, you can just use prop to get the value like this, or even set the value to true or false. That's it. Then what do we have in DOM manipulation? So of course, at any time if you want to remove that item as well as its all content, just use remove method. So for example, so before I think we used the empty one, right, on UL. We have just one UL, and since we used empty before, so what it was doing, it was emptying out that entire UL element, but of course it was not removing the UL element itself. If you want to do that, well, just use remove. In that case, it will remove the content as well as itself from the DOM tree, and then you will see there is no UL anymore. So that's how you can use remove as well. Another simple function to handle your perfect. Now you have text function. So what does this text mean? So anytime you want to get the text content of div or span or p or h1, whatever, at that time use text, and then of course you will get the text from that element. So for example, I want to get the text content of the UL, and what is I'm typing here, console.log. If you see here, you will actually get just the text, not even a single element here, or not even a single HTML reference, just the text, plain text from here. So although you have asked for UL, it will go down there and just collect all the text values that you have and return you. That's it. It won't return you the li tags or everything else. If you want to get that, then just use HTML. So this is the difference between these two. The text one will return only the text, the other one will return including the tags as well. So that's your HTML versus text. Then what about getting the values of inputs? So in that case, use val. So this is the difference. For all the text content that you want, use text, and that would apply to all of the containers like div, span, p, h1, anchor tag, everything. Wherever you type text or you have text which user cannot change, then of course you should be using text. But what about the inputs? So in that case, use the val operator. So of course, or val function, and this can be used to get the current value of the first element in the set of matched element, of course. So let's say I have this disabled input and I want to get its value. Input disabled, we just saw yesterday. And then let's do this. So of course you can have its value, which is nothing but the text inside that value, or you can also have this one, which I don't know how to reference this. So it has name equals to my input, right? So since it's a attribute selector, we can just use attribute selector actually. Input like this, and then you can get empty because right now there is nothing. And the same val can be used for the select as well. So for example, if you want to check what is the current value of the select or drop down, just pass select and then it will give you the currently selected value. You don't have to worry about selected index on those different properties. Just fire val on any type of select or any type of input as well. So they will return you this one. What about if you want to clone something, or something meaning some DOM element? In that case, you can just use clone with two different parameters. One, just nothing. In that case, what you are asking is just clone this selector or whatever is written by this selector and give me that new element or copy of that. If you pass true, then we will learn about event handling. But if you pass true here, you will also be getting a copy of the event handler on those particular objects. So that's how you can use clone and clone true. So for example, let's say I want to, I don't know, clone p element. So let's say you have my p and you want to clone it. So of course, as the name suggests, you will get a true copy or a deep copy of this my p, which is somewhere here. And now you can do whatever you want with this CP, which is independent of my P now. If you want to add it back to the DOM, well, you can just add it. For example, I want to add or append to the body, just something like this. And then of course it should be added, not CP, C capital P, okay. It should be added to somewhere at the last element because you added at the last of the body. So of course you can clone it and then add it again. These two are independent from each other. So this is different, this is different. Now there will be some issue, right? When you use clone, it has cloned everything, including the ID. So now in your document you have two elements with the same ID. So remember this thing. Even attributes are cloned, okay? Text also, of course, the element itself, but all the attributes as well. So remember that if you have ID set on that cloned element, it will also be copied, and then this is no longer a valid HTML, because if you try to run myp now, you will always get the first one, this one, not the one here, because as I said, ID should be unique in your document. So I think that's it about, okay, one more thing probably. So if you remember, we have the data attribute in HTML5. Now this jQuery was developed way before HTML5. At that time there was no mechanism natively in HTML5 to, or HTML whatever that was that time, which is 4.1. There was no method to add some custom data to the particular HTML element. In that case, this method was very good, or jQuery had that method of data. So what it was doing, it is the same thing that you do these days with your HTML5 data attributes, where you just put data hyphen attribute name and the value of the attribute. So here in jQuery, the method was there since the start. So you can put some data related to this div and just name it, or the key is the user, the value is some user. You can set it. You can also set some JavaScript object for that, also possible. Or if you just don't pass anything, you can get the value if there was set on this item. So of course this data works both ways. It can be a setter as well for a single key value. It can set an object as well for a key, or if you don't pass any value, it will return you the value for that particular key that you pass here. So this is the data, and then of course you can remove the data associated with that element itself. So another feature of this is when they saw that okay, HTML5 has now access for this data attributes like this. So so how to get this hello value now? If you want to get this hello value in the jQuery here, so there are two options for you. Either you say okay, find out the button, whatever it is. Yep, a button, and then you will say okay, get me the value of this attribute, entire attribute, which is we just saw in the previous few slides, like this, and then you can log it. So you can have that hello now because you have asked for the attribute data XYZ and then you are trying to get its value. But this data method, well, when they saw that now your HTML5 has the data attributes, now you don't need to pass the entire data attribute with the attr function. What you can do is instead is you can call data and then just pass the XYZ. So they have overloaded kind of. They have generalized this data method now. So if this is available as a data attribute, for example here, it will return you its value, or if it is not, then of course it will try to find out in the memory, because people can also set values in using the data which was already there before, like this way. So first of all, it will go to your DOM element and then will get the value of the data attribute if you have set with the same key. If you haven't, then of course it will go in the memory and find out if the user had called the data with some key and value before. If it was, it will return you this value. And then of course if you want to remove the data associated with anything, you can just use remove. And I don't think this will remove your remove data. It will not be removing your attribute there. So it is still there. So of course using this you cannot alter your HTML or attribute on the HTML, but you can at least get the value of the data attribute, and you don't have to pass data hyphen if you are using data method. But if you are using attr method, then of course you have to pass the entire name of the attribute including data hyphen XYZ here. Any doubt? So DOM manipulation, then of course you can filter out few items, so or something like that. So let's say here you have selected all the li elements before. Now after some time processing, you want to filter only the even ones from or odd ones from those set of li elements. Then you can use the filter, pass another selector. So what it will do, it will apply that selector only on this result and then return you the values. For example, you were doing some large processing here. You selected all the li elements before, right? So of course there are multiple in our case, so there will be multiple. Then after some time you do something and then you figure out, okay, now I need only the even ones. So instead of going and making another call for something like li.even, because right now if you do something like this, you are asking your jQuery to again go to the document and find out all the even elements now. Well, you have already reduced the set to li and you have the reference to that object. So what you can do right now is just use the same object and then filter on that one and pass one more, let's say odd. So you don't have to go back to your DOM to filter out again. You can just filter on the same object that you already have. Of course, bigger approach to reduce or to improve the efficiency. Otherwise you will be, if your document is too much or too long, you will all be making these calls multiple times to ask jQuery to go to the document every time and then select items for that. It can have performance penalty if you do that thing. If you want to store it for somewhere, just put it in the variable, use it later for some reason. Just don't ignore. If you think that you will want to have access to this, just keep it in the variable. So that's your filter. Of course, it is used to reduce the set of mesh elements to that mesh selector. Then there is one special thing called map. This is interesting. So okay, what it does, let's see. What you want actually, you want to go through this entire all the list, and you want to get or there should be some better way, a better example. Let's have that one. So we have this multiple checkboxes, right? Okay, so many. Let's put few of them to checked status. Something like this. Now what you want is, and they have all different, let's say text. So let's say this is check 1. I'm just making it complex. Two, 3, 5, 6, and 7, and there is 4 as well. What you want actually, you want to select, you want to get an array of this text for all of the selected ones only, right? So of course there are two approaches. What you want actually an array to just to have check 2, check 3, and check 4. That's it. So first of all, you will want to select all these inputs which are checked. So what you can do, something like this, right? Input.checked, and let's have, assuming this is an array, which is not in this case. It is a JavaScript object. Let's print it first. So of course we can have one JavaScript object which is having what, 3 inputs I think, which are checked, right? Now what we wanted actually the text for those check boxes. So you can always do something like text here, and then you do that. Your AAR will be nothing because these are inputs. You cannot have checked actually. What about well? Well, nobody has value here, so you can have that one. You cannot have that as well. What about the HTML here? So it is also empty. Good. Yep, so let me put value here actually, just to be, because what you are trying to do is rubbish. This guy doesn't have any text. The text you see is on the label input, so of course you cannot access it. So I wanna put some value here. And let's call it the same thing. Check 1, check 2, all so on and so forth. So we have all these values. Now we just want to get an array of all the values which are selected. So of course if we do like this, you will just get for the first one, because this value one, and it will only return you the first one. I mean, there is no method to return all of them together. So what you can do right now is you can use the map on this one, which is like this, and here you can say, you can pass one callback and say, okay, apply this function on each of the element which is available from this selector, and then of course everybody is returning something. Create an array from that returned item and return to the whoever is calling it. So what we can do, we can just pass one function here with 2 arguments, and those 2 arguments are index, or the index of that particular item in the jQuery object, and that that DOM element itself. So you can something like pass here. Now you have access to that individual DOM element because you are looping over that collection here. So what was your collection? Nothing. Probably. Okay, so since you didn't pass anything so far, so if this guy will be having a collection of what? 1, 2, and 3. Now you want to get each of the value return as a part of an array. So what you can do here is, how to get the value of this guy? Well, let's call it val or v, and then you have access to the individual DOM element, right? Because you are kind of looping through this entire jQuery array-like object. So you have access to DOM element, but this is DOM element, remember. You have to convert that into jQuery one, which is just this, and then you can get value by calling a jQuery function on that. Now you have this value for each of the DOM element that you are looping, in this case all the checked ones. Now you can just return it from here, and then suddenly you will have an array, of course as part of jQuery object, where you will be having all the values for the selected ones. So we can use that one. Now, although this is not your traditional array, there are methods in jQuery to convert this jQuery-like object into traditional array, because you are having 3 indexes and then length 3. That's it. That's what you want actually. We will talk about that method later, but here what you have did is you have applied this function on each of the element available from this selector using map, and then you have returned whatever you want to process here. Just return it. So in the end it will be returning you a jQuery object with whatever you have returned from here as part of the jQuery object index values. So of course you can do something like this using map. We will talk about how to convert from this jQuery array-like object to array, which is native to JavaScript, little later. So I'm gonna stop here, and then we'll start with events at 7:45. If you have any question until then, let me know. Otherwise we'll start after 10 minutes. Okay, so we have gone through some styling actions or methods, some DOM manipulation methods. Now let's talk about one of the better feature of jQuery is how to add event handler and how to remove or how to trigger. So we have event actions as well available to us, and there are many event actions. There will be lots of, but if you see actually, or after 2 slides you will be figure out, I mean, there is no need of so many event handlers to be very precise. So let's talk about the basic ones, which is the on, of course, and then previously it used to be called bind. It is still, there is still a version which is called bind, but I think after 1 point, let me check, this is now deprecated, and even this is use when, yep. So as of 1.7, on method is preferred method for attaching event handlers to the document. For earlier version, bind was there, but since you will all be using anything more than 1.7, version 1.7 of the jQuery, so always go with the on method. And why you use on? Well, you use on to set event handlers. So just like we had that add event listener in case of plain vanilla JavaScript, so here you have on. Now the feature or benefit of this on is, well, you don't have to figure out whether you are supporting IE6 to 8 or IE9 and all other browsers, because you remember there was some discrepancy between add event listeners versus attach event, which was specific to the IE. So here you don't have to worry about that. jQuery will take care of whether to use add event listener or to attach event. So here you can just use on. So again, you can have your jQuery selector, use on, and then say what event. So of course it will be some event type, and then you can pass your callback handler here. You will get reference to event just like you get in case of a event listener. You can get reference to this as well, which will refer to that particular element. And since here what we are doing is just converting that into the jQuery object to put some jQuery function on that. So of course it is the same, exactly same. Now you can also bind same function for 2 different event types. So for example here click as well as double click you want, or for some other reason just put all the event types separated out by a space, and jQuery will take care of putting this event handler for this separate events. Now if you want to remove, which is similar to remove event listener in JavaScript, so you can just use off. So of course on versus off, or if you use bind, then the other one is unbind, but you don't have to use bind. On is the preferred one now, and so to go with that approach. So it's easy, very easy actually. So let's say you have this button, and when you click that button you want to execute something. So what you can do, you have selected that, just say on, and on the click of that you want to execute some function, just execute that particular function. That's it. You can pass event, and then of course here you can, let's say console.log, just log this keyword. So when you have a button, then of course you can log this. That's what we are doing to check what this keyword will refer to inside this function. So it is the same DOM element that you have clicked. So that is also available here, and then of course you can also have access to the event itself. Now one important thing to remember, that this event is not your native event object. This is normalized event from jQuery. And when I say normalized, then you will see there are not much properties here. We had so many properties on the event object or the native event object, which comes via add event listener. And here we have few basic ones only. The reason is, for example, this guy, which. So if I click or left click here, this which is 1 in case of, oh sorry, it can be depending on the requirement, the button one, I forgot. So the button is 0 for the left click in Chrome. In case of I do right click, then of course there is none, but in case of IE, this button's value will be 1 for left click if you are trying to use just the native events or the native event objects using add event listener. But here this is jQuery event. You can see here it's n.event type, not the mouse event that we were getting in the native JavaScript. So this is the difference here, and then that's why what jQuery would do, it will say, okay, whenever you click left on this button, I will give you 0. So it's fixed whether you are using Chrome or IE or Firefox. So that's why it's easier to handle this events or write event handlers using jQuery, because they will normalize this event object to you, so that you don't have to worry about different cross-browser issues related to this button or which or different things. So you're fine there. Now how to remove the event handler, just use off, which is just opposite of on. And again, you can have multiple event handlers as well. Sorry, multiple same event handler for the multiple events. Just separate them by space. So that's very easy now to add and to remove. So although you have all these facilities here, like you can just put on in the event type, jQuery will do so much for you, and we'll talk about that in a while. But before that, there is a trigger as well. If you remember, we had dispatch event in JavaScript, which was used to manually or programmatically trigger an event on an object. And then if you remember again, we had to create that object by ourselves, the entire object. For example, if you have to create click event or trigger click event in using plain JavaScript, you would have to create that entire object of mouse event with unknown parameters, even I don't know, so many things, and then pass that event object. Here it's very easy, you just pass the type, that's it, and jQuery will take care of figuring out what event object to initialize and how to write that in pure JavaScript. So it's jQuery's headache, not yours. So you can just say, okay, just trigger this event on this object. That's it. You don't have to worry about anything. So for example, this is a button. I'm not going to click it, or I will trigger a click event on this using JavaScript only. So I'm going to do that after a few seconds. Let's say 2 seconds or something. What I will be doing, I will be making a call to this button, then say trigger. What trigger? So of course trigger click event after 2 seconds. So of course 1, 2, and then you will see that it had triggered the click event. So of course it will trigger the click, and it will call or execute all the callbacks or event handlers that were assigned to click. So that's how better it is than compared to your JavaScript, the plain JavaScript. You don't have to create that entire object. You can just pass the type of the event. That's it. So that's easy. So what I was talking about are the shorthand methods. So for a lot of these events like click, double click, mouse over, hover, key press, key up, key down. So you can add events like this on and then now name of the event. But in case of jQuery, there are shorthand methods as well, like this. So what is the difference between this and this? So of course we already have this right here, click. Now in jQuery, you can just have a shorthand for this. So you can just type click and then pass a function to that. That's it. So it's now a click event, and similarly you have lots of other events available to you, like methods inside jQuery. So of course these are shorthands, but internally they will always call this on and then click again. If you want to see lots of other events, then these are or event shorthands like blur, change. They're all event, but they are shorthands for change event in this case, blur event, click event, double click, different things. It's like focus out, focus in, focus, mouse over, key down, key press, key up, different things. Even the load event, which is the own load event, so it's there. And then of course there will be a ready as well, which we have already seen. Specify a function to execute when the DOM is fully loaded. Resize, scroll, they are all actually the events which you can also or always use like this structure to bind an event handler. But jQuery will say, okay, if you don't like that format, just use this one where you have an action like thing for that particular event. So just like for using, instead of using on and click as the string passed to the on method, here you can just right click. So both are possible as soon as, or as long as that particular event is supported as a shorthand here. So you can always go to the events and then figure out whether your event is supported as a shorthand. If it is, then you don't have to write this much. you can just replace it via the event name. What else? Then of course for the form we have some specific events like focus and change. So what happens when something focus or gets focused, then of course at that time it will fire, or it will write this like this. So for example in our case, do we have something for the focus? So let's say, I think we have all the inputs. So whenever the focus or we focus inside that, let's just execute or just write this thing. So for example I focus here, you see handle for focus is called, because as soon as it received a focus it will execute this event handler. Then if some value changes here, then also this can be executed, or you can write an handler for that. So for example, if the value change here, meaning I type something and the value is changing and I get out, then of course right now it won't do anything, but as soon as I get out from here it will print that thing, or it will execute the change event. Then of course you can also trigger events like this. So instead of calling trigger and passing the event type, you can directly call the shorthand like this, and it will take care of triggering that event programmatically. What else? Then yeah, special ones, which is the submit for the form. So if you want to intercept the submit event of the form, what you can do is just use a submit event, and then what your JavaScript will be doing, or jQuery will be doing, it will be calling the submit event first, and then it will submit form to the backend or to the action attribute of the form. So this is the one. If you don't want to submit that, just return false from there. So for example, you have this form, right, and right now it goes somewhere, nothing, just some hash, and let's say it has a method of get. It has few inputs, let's say just one, and one button. Right, let me open into here. So if I submit this form now, let's just open this, what happens, let's see, in the network tab. If I submit, write something and submit now, you will see that I will go to the action of the form, which is hash, and then of course Plunker will say I don't have hash, so there will be an error, but still you see this, it went to the user, it passed the user parameter that you have sent or set in this input as soon as you submit, because it is a get parameter, a get request. Of course it will pass user and the value that you submitted as part of the URL. So you have it. Now before handing over, or before browser handing this over to the backend, what you want to intercept this event so that you can check some things and then submit it. So in that case this method is helpful. So what you can do, we just have one form, right? So you can bind this event for the submit event, and then let's, for example, this. So what we have done now, so we have said, okay, whenever the form submits, log this statement on the console and return false from here. So if you return false from here, this form will not be submitted. So let's see once again. Hi. Okay. So we have this, and as soon as I write it and submit, you will see that okay, it has logged something, which is this, and then it has returned false. So that's why you don't see the parameters here, because it has stopped or it has intercepted, and then it said okay, don't move forward, just return false from here. If you don't return anything from here, or you return true, that means you are asking to okay, go ahead with your submission of the form to the backend. That's it. So now if you do something like refresh it and then this, then of course it will log here, and then it will hand it over to the backend. So something like this. And also of course it did log here, but the page was refreshed, so of course you can't see the log here. So that's the submit event. Okay, so yep, that's the pretty much end of your actions in case of jQuery. Now there's important concept in case of jQuery or when using jQuery, and it is chaining. Not chaining Tatum, just chaining. So here chaining means to connect multiple functions, events, and on selectors. So why do we have this actually? So look for this example. So let's say we select something. Yep, for example here an element with the ID div content, and then we have some actions to do on that particular set of elements. So we say, okay, add one class, change some CSS, some other function, call some other function for fading. So now you see we are making this selection 3 times. So jQuery is actually going into a DOM and then asking for this element 3 times. Why do we need this to select 3 times, right? Shouldn't there be some mechanism that, okay, once I select this element, I can apply all this method without selecting it again, just on the same element in the same line or something? So that's where your chaining comes in picture. So here, if you are using chaining, what you can do is select this item once, only once instead of 3 times, and then go on applying these functions just after each other. So for example, I have applied add class first, then I have applied CSS, and then fading. So they can all be applied on the same element, of course, by just using these dots one after another. Now important things regarding chaining is it makes, of course, your code short and easy to manage, because instead of writing 3 lines, you are just done with 1 line. Plus it is more efficient than this way, because in this case you are asking jQuery to find out or select this item 3 times. Here you have just said, okay, select 1 time, get its reference in memory, and then apply 3 more action onto that. Of course, better performance. The other thing is that you have to keep in mind is the order of these actions are from left to right. So of course the first this will be selected, then this will be applied, then this will be applied, and then at the end fade in will be applied. So this is left to right, the order of execution. Okay, so this is important. Instead of using multiple times like this, just use once, or just pass a selector 1 and then execute all the functions one after another. And remember the order as well, left to right. Okay, now the best one, Ajax. And I don't need Plunker anymore. So we have seen how hard it was to write Ajax in case of plain JavaScript. You have to first create an instance of XHR object, and which depends on what browser you are using. Then you have to manually set up that XHR object instance using open method. It can be get or post. If it is post, then you have to set content type and then set the parameters inside the send method, then wait for the ready state 4 to get the response, just something to wait for the 200 response, 200 status code, and then all other things, right? Different things. Now, and again, for the JSON-P, if you are trying to use cross-domain, you have to write that entire logic of creating script on the fly, calling a callback, different things. Now, in case of jQuery, they have simplified Ajax to the simplest level that you can even think of. So what they ask, or what the function asks is, so the function is jQuery Ajax. Of course, there is no selector. It's a function in itself. And now you just pass, you call this function by passing one big object like this, and it will perform the asynchronous HTTP Ajax request. So let's see what are the properties in this object or the configuration object for Ajax. So first of all, it asks whether you want it to be asynchronous or synchronous. So default is asynchronous, and then, so that's why you can use true or false. If you don't give it, then it's true. Then there's a property called before send, which is a function. So you can put your code here, which will be called just before making this request. So there is one feature with this one now. It will be called just before sending this request. Then you can have whether you want to cache this request or response or not. So if you remember, in case of JavaScript, if you are using the same GET request multiple times, your browser may cache the response, and next time it will not send that request to the server. Instead, it will return the response from the browser itself or its own cache. So depending on this parameter, you can set whether you want to cache it or you don't want to cache it. So mostly you don't want to cache it. Then we'll come back to complete actually. Then of course you can optionally set content type. If you don't set it, then of course default is the one that every server understands, which is the form URL encoded, so which is default. If you don't set it, don't worry, you are fine. The data that you want to send to the server, now it can be a JavaScript object or it can be a string as well. So that's all possible here. The data type that you are expecting from the server, now it can be, you can be expecting JSON from the server, XML from the server, HTML, JSONP, text, anything. And this is where JSONP implementation comes into picture. We will talk about the JSONP, but yeah, in your project mostly you will be expecting JSON, but again you will not be using jQuery. So but still, if you want to expect, you are sure that your server will be sending something, just use JSON like this. Now what happens if there is an error? Then there is an error property, and whatever functions that you write here inside here, this function will be executed if there is an error like 404, 500, all this. We will talk about JSONP parameter later when we cover JSONP. Then what happens if everything is okay, everything is good, when the request or the response is received, the status code is 200, everything. Then just write your code here that you want to do. jQuery will execute this function when the response is received, when everything is good. Now what type of request is this, whether it's a GET or POST, so you can provide here in the string, and then at the end, the most important, the URL of the request. So that's it, that's what you have to do, and you don't have to write logic for creating the object, initializing the object, and then using open and get method, then waiting for a particular ready state to be 4, then waiting for status code to be 200, different things. This is what you want, that's it, and that's all you have in the Ajax. So again, async before send. Okay, I was talking about complete. Now let's talk about this. So we have error, right? So in some cases there is some error from the backend, like 404 page not found or 500 internal server error. This function will be executed, right? What if this is a success? Then of course this will be executed. What if you want to execute a function after any one of success or error? So let's say if success, then also execute that function after success. If there is an error, then also execute this function of the error. So then this is the complete one. So it is called after success or error callbacks. So doesn't matter whether it was success or error, this complete will always be called after any one of this. So that's why complete is useful there if you want to just do something. It is analogous to this before send, meaning this is before sending and this complete will be after you have the response. Now response may be having an error or it can be a success message. Doesn't matter. It will execute either after success or error callbacks. So that's how you can have complete as well. Let me just open the demo that I have. So this was our Ajax, right? And then that was the code that we have written to create the object first. This is in the plain JavaScript. Then created the open and the send or use those methods, and we added the response handler, waited for ready state to be 4, so status equals to 200, and then we process everything, right? And even though we knew that the response coming from the server is JSON string, we had to convert into JSON object manually and then use for our purpose. Now this is what we were doing when we had plain JavaScript understanding. Now what happens if it is just a jQuery? Well, in that case things are very easy. First of all, this has to be HTML. Why it is not having the color codes? Okay, probably the plugin expired or something. There was some error message. So instead of Ajax, let me just put scripts / jQAjax. I think I have one file like this. And what we have here, let me just get rid of this. So I have this empty jQuery Ajax version, Right now it is nothing but DOM document.ready, and what I will be doing is I will be just making this example. So for example, if you are talking about a real life example, just this one, and of course you want to execute this when you click on this button. There is one button named the Ajax button. So what you can do now, since you know event handling very much, so you can do Ajax button. Is it the name? Ajax button with an ID? Yep. And whenever someone clicks on this, then only call the Ajax. Something like this. Now just put your Ajax code here, which is nothing but calling jQuery Ajax and setting some parameters. So we have this Ajax, so we are saying okay, asynchronous should be true, don't cache it. The data that I am trying to send is username and email, like this. This is of course one JavaScript object that you can send. The data that I'm expecting from the server is JSON. This is what should happen when it's an error. This is what should happen when it is a success, where it have to go, and what is what there is the type and where it has to go. So let me first give the same example which we have taken here, and not the Google.com one, the getting this dummy JSON from our own front end, our own backend actually. So I can do something like where is this dummy JSON? Okay, lab demo dummy JSON .json, and of course it has to be a GET request because there is nothing to process on the backend my system, and there is no data that I'm sending, so I can get rid of that. And since I'm saying I'm expecting a JSON data from the server, I actually don't have to manually convert or parse the data that I will be receiving. jQuery will automatically do that for me. So I will always get the data object, and it will be proper JavaScript object, automatically converted from that JSON string to JavaScript object, because you have asked jQuery that you are expecting a JSON, so it will figure out that logic by itself. So this is the page. Right now we are not doing anything, and it says dollar is not defined. Good. The reason is I don't have JavaScript, jQuery anywhere. I'm not sure if I have it here in the lib. I do. So I have loaded that, refresh the page, lib jQuery -1 dot. Okay, this is dot, not hyphen. Okay, so we are good. Now let's go to network tab, wipe out everything, and just click on this one. So yep, we clicked, there was a request to this JSON, and it got that particular JSON file. And then if you see here, you already have the object directly. You don't have JSON string. The reason is because jQuery already converted that JSON string into the JSON or JavaScript object, because you have asked for data type equal to JSON. Now you can just process it. So since it's a success that you want, what we wanted actually is the title value here should be somewhere from here. The same logic that we had here, like this. So we want to set it on this guy, item with the ID target. So again, since this is jQuery, we know how to access the element with the ID, and then let's say text, and just pass whatever we want, because this is the data that we have, and we want to set data dot glossary dot glossdiv, and if you expand it, it has a title which is something title. That's what we want to set it here or display here. So yep, this is what it will be. Refresh the page, click here, and then you see something else which was loaded from this JSON file from the server side. jQuery did processing for you, most of the processing actually, and then it converted or passed this JSON string into the JSON, and then it has we did our processing, which is just displaying it on the target or ID with the target. That's it. Any doubt? So of course it is much easier than writing your JavaScript plain in the plain JavaScript. Few lines only, and of course you have this error in a nicer way as a success. Then of course there are some other functions as well, or options that we have seen, like complete, content type, you can handle it manually. If you don't, then of course it's by default the form URL encoded. You can send the data even in the object form or string form. jQuery will figure out how to send it properly, so everything is good. Then again, this is the main function, right? jQuery Ajax. Then there are shorthands as well. So something like get JSON, which is just a small shorthand saying give me the URL, the data, and the success function. That's it. So it's a shorthand for, or it is equivalent to this. So we are saying Ajax, data type is JSON, URL is whatever URL here, data, whatever data you are passing here, and then this is a success callback. That's it. So this is equivalent to this, but again, I have never used shorthands, because if you already know the basic stuff, then probably you don't have to use shorthands. Because what if I want error function as well? In this case, you cannot. So at least in case of this, you have the full control over Ajax request. Here, you're not. So that is one of the shorthand of Ajax in jQuery. So what about the JSON-P? So remember, I talked about one issues with the cross browser. Here again, the same issue. If you use jQuery and connect to any other origin, not your own, in that case it will, or the browser will restrict you to do that. Because if you think jQuery, what they are doing, they are also using the same JavaScript code or better version of this JavaScript code that we have written that day. So it's the same thing. So of course you will have the same error saying what is that, allow access allow cross origin not defined or something. So yeah, the same thing. But in case of jQuery, they have implemented JSON-P as well. So you have to just pass the URL of that server, which will allow you, although it is on some other server, not on your server, then you just say the name of the callback. So it is an important property, and wherever you have the server, they ask for this callback property. You just display it, or you just pass it. The data types, of course, you have to expect JSON-P from the server side, otherwise JSON-P is not possible. The data, if you want to send something, or success function. So in this example, what we are doing is we are trying to call one query from YQL. So again, if you haven't heard about YQL, so it's a Yahoo query language console, and there they have all the data in the world inside United States. So they have different tables, publicly available tables, right? If you want to get weather forecast of some city, just pass something. Or if you want to search some place for some restaurant, some business, you can do that one as well. So that's what we are trying to do here. So this is the Yahoo query language, or the URL that they have asked us here. And then, for example, in case of local search, let's say this is my zip, just provide them your zip and search for query pizza. When you test it here, they will show you all. Let's have the tree view. Scroll down to the results here. So they will give you some results related to pizza around your zip, because they have all this data. Now I just want to get that data into my system, and since they are using, or they will be providing you the JSON-P, so of course you can have all this data in your system as well, although they are running on some other servers. So this is what I have. The query, select star from local search where zip is equals to this and query equal to pizza, and format is JSON that I want. So let's see if their servers are up and allowing us the access. Well, let's have it something like this and then create one more button here actually. Click for JSONP and let's call it YQL button. Same event handler here as well. Just provide like this, click, and have a callback or an event handler. Now this time just pass this Ajax request into this. So yeah, that's what we did. If you go there in the YQL, they will say okay how to use it, and they will figure out this is how you have to pass. And I'm not sure if they are still supporting JSONP, but they used to be, and that's how I created one of the projects. Let's see if they are doing it today. So let's just click on this one. Let's see, we have something. Yep, we got the data from there. Let's see what happened actually here. Once again, and again, remember this is a cross domain call, but still you are able to call it. The reason is you are using JSONP. So let's make a call again, and let's see what happened here. So this is the query that you have asked until here. Then of course the format that you have asked. You remember what is this? So this is a timestamp. So why this is a timestamp here appended by jQuery for you? The reason is you asked for caching, which is by default false. So that's why you see a timestamp attached to that one. So that's how jQuery will make sure that this is not cached anytime. Then also you will see that it has passed some query parameter like callback, your own query, the format, and then of course some random timestamp. What else? One more thing, or the most important thing is, since you are connecting to different domain, that domain has set access control allow origin header to star. Of course, because this is YQL, they want everybody to use this service so that they can get the data. So that's why it is set to star, meaning everybody can use this in the world to get the data, even you, everybody. And then of course if you go to the response, they have this proper response with this callback function going on. Then of course in the end you will be getting your own object, which is same as you were getting on their own system, like having the results like this. And then this is the first result around me for pizza, which is Little Caesars pizza, and then second will be Domino's pizza, all this pizza items, because that's what you search. So of course the point is you can connect or you can call Ajax cross domain as well, as long as that server is allowing you to make a call, because of course it has to make sure that it has set the access control allow origin to star or your domain to allow you the access. So yeah, that's very easy to call or make cross domain Ajax request here. Does Google offer any such services? The question, I think yep. There is something called Google Places, but you need to have key for that, API key, and really I don't want to log in for this. There used to be for, not for business, I mean it used to be for individual usage as well. Looks like no longer. API for no business, personal. Can I use without a personal website? Let's see. because with the last, I think this January, they converted every of their API for the business. I mean, entire Google Drive API is on the business. Nothing is on. Even Maps now needs an, I think, uh, a key to pass, API key or something. So let's see. They need that authentication, different things. They are strict to protect their data. YQL, nobody cares. Just pass it. The only condition on YQL is just you have some limit, I think, the usage limit. Yep, usage information and limits. So hourly cap, 2000 requests per hour. Per IP daily cap, there is no daily cap. If it is a public API, which is in our case it is a public one, but if you are dealing with some API key which they will be having some for some protected data, then of course there is a limit. Anyways, so I think I must be having some example here, or one of the project that I created for some of the bridge, or with some of the bridge. So again, this is using lots of features of Java, JavaScript, jQuery, CSS of course, and then the HTML5 as well. So right now, as soon as I refresh, it has figured out my current location, and that's how I'm using this marker to represent my current location. Of course, I don't live in school, it is somewhere else. And then I'm using the data list here to say, okay, my location, find out within 10 miles of my location something called bar, go there. So what I'm doing actually here, if you see, I will make a call to YQL right now to get the data, and then as soon as I have the data, which is from YQL, then I will display that data here as well as put it here. And I'm displaying on the Google Maps, but I'm getting the data from YQL. Interesting, right? So yep, I have limited that to 20 items. So this is how I can have it. So for example here, different things, and they are all numbered here as well. I think this project should already be there on your box.com. Just look into the coding here. Or you can also put some other zip, for example, DC. So this is now in Washington, DC, some items. Okay, so yeah, this was one of the project using two different APIs. One is YQL for getting the data, other one is Google Maps API for representing on the map. So that's the JSONP. It's very interesting as far as you don't have to write too much code if you are using jQuery JSONP version. Okay, then I'm gonna stop here now. We have, I think, 4 slides more for utility functions. Nothing but some general functions like for loop, some extend, different things which we will cover tomorrow. And then after that we will start talking about the backend, or having the backend. Now before you go out from today's class, try to install all these applications on your system for tomorrow's class. And again, I don't have presentation tomorrow, it's just a demo class, so if you want to do the coding along with me, that should be fine. We have 2 days of backend, so you should be able to do that together as well. And let me see. So I'm gonna paste here as well the same thing. So for tomorrow's class, Java backend class, download following, not this date. Java IC development kit or JDK 7, you can download it from there. Oh, okay, let me try it again. MySQL Community Edition or Community Server or whatever it is, just download it from there. MySQL Workbench, Apache 7, don't download 8. The reason is there is no support for V8 in Eclipse, I think, if you are using Eclipse Kepler. So these are the links. I think there is a new Eclipse which landed last month or something. The brand new Eclipse. I still don't know if it has support for Apache 8 as of now. And it is called something. Luna. अरे ये तो हमारी इंडिया में Luna. Is it really Luna? Of course they have support for Java 8 now. I'm still not sure if they have support for Apache 8. I think it should be. So even they have updated their website. It looks good now. So yeah, if you are downloading the Luna 4.4, I think then you should be able to work with Apache version 8 as well, including Java 7, Java 8 or something. But this is the tested one, so just go with this one if you don't want to mess up with too many things. And then of course install a plugin, M2E plugin in Eclipse for Maven, because we will be managing dependencies using Maven. So we'll talk about all these things. Just prepare your desktops or laptops with these applications. JDK 7, MySQL Community Edition or whatever it is called. And it's called Community Edition, of course. And Community Server. Okay, this one. Then Workbench will already be there here on this link. The Tomcat will be available here. You have to install Tomcat 7 if you are using Kepler, which is 4.3. Juno was I think 4.2 on Eclipse. And then install the M2E plugin for Maven, and it's all there. Okay, so be prepared with these applications on your system so that if you want to work with or along with me, you can do that. But before that, you have JavaScript quiz tomorrow, so appear in that quiz as well. And then after 6:30, which is the deadline, so we'll join at 6:30 tomorrow, and then we will start with JavaScript. We'll end actually the jQuery first, and then we will start with our backend coding. Any question? Okay, then let's meet again at tomorrow 6:30 p.m. actually. Thanks. Bye bye.